Mike, should we do the journalist way? Like, Mike, tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me, how you got involved and we were joking around. We were joking around about this offline, Mike. Parallel Mike and I, and so I thought I'd throw that in. There's a joke just to catch him off guard for a second.
I didn't even know we was recording, so you definitely caught me off guard.
Oh man, lots going on, and I always thank you for coming back and chatting with me. We found that we have so many so many things in common in our personal lives that we didn't even know the first time we spoke, and here we are, big fight week this week, and lots of running events that have occurred, and we said, well, we'll go through the serious stuff first, and then we'll do the little bit of the not so dark and gloomy things at the end. And plus, I don't want to bore the audience talking about Manny Pacquiao right in the beginning of all this. But where do you think things are right now in terms of the world, and how are you feeling?
Well, it's not looking good, to be fair, Mike. Let's be honest. It's not looking too good out there. I like to look at things from a really high perspective, and what I mean by that is if you take that 10,000 foot view and just look down on it all and try to make sense of what's happening, and I always find that gives me the most realistic narrative to go by, because as we said before the show started, when we were speaking privately, none of us actually know where this is going to end up, and I don't think any of us can truly predict the fine points of the narratives, like what's happened since Trump got back in power with the tariffs and the chaos that we've seen and the daily tweeting that's sending people into all kinds of anxiety, stress, and the markets are moving up and down. It's absolute chaos out there, and nobody can predict those finer points of it all, the micro. But at the macro level, a lot of what's happening was predictable and is predictable. And I think if you look at where America is in its life cycle in terms of it being, well, it's not meant to be a democracy, but it's kind of become a democracy. And democracies always end. They last about 200 years. I don't know. Have you ever heard of the person? His name's, I think it's Alexander Tytler. He was a Scottish guy from the 1700s, and he spoke about the cycle of democracy.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Well, he was a historian, and he studied the world's greatest civilizations from the beginning of history, and he said that all of them really go through a cycle. And I'm talking about the civilizations you'd want to be a part of, not the ones that were just totalitarian. And he says that you have about 200 years where things are pretty good, and they progress through a kind of process. So they start off in bondage, which is precisely where America started off under the British Crown. They were a tax colony, they were enslaved. I mean, whenever I see you, Mike, you've got this big American flag behind you. And that's what I think of as America, as this nation that was born out of bondage. It escaped the bondage, it had the revolution, and then it set itself up as a republic. And it says that from bondage comes spiritual faith, so that's what inspires people. And if we go to the Constitution, it speaks in the very first line about having a creator. Our unalienable rights are endowed by our creator to give us freedom and liberty. And America got to that point, or at least the people who created America did, and that's what inspired them to escape the bondage. And from spiritual faith, that inspires this great courage. From courage, you get to liberty. From liberty, you get to abundance, and that's when you have a great nation, which we could say was America circa 1800s to, let's say, 1950. And then from abundance, you get to selfishness, and this is something we spoke about in our last couple of conversations, Mike, where you get a people who have had it good for too long, and they start to expect the good times to continue, and that they can actually not work as hard. They don't need to work so hard. They can vote in people who will give them freebies, give them stuff that they want. And that selfishness goes to this complacency, which takes you to apathy, and apathy eventually to dependence, and dependence back to bondage. And that's the life cycle that Tytler was describing. And I think if we zoom out on America, forgetting about Trump and Biden and all of the left and right paradigm, and you just look at the trajectory of America over the last 50 years, it's been one towards bondage, where both sides don't want to take responsibility for themselves anymore. People don't want individualism. They want to vote somebody in who's going to give them stuff, who's going to fix the problems. It's short-termism. It's unrealistic solutions. If I vote this person in, they're just going to fix it all. And it's really lending itself, sadly, to totalitarianism, where you just have cult of personality. You vote somebody in, and that person's the great leader who's going to fix it all. And both the left and right are looking for that. So that's how I see where we are in the world. And it's not just an American phenomenon, it's actually across the spectrum in the West. And it's pretty scary, Mike. It's pretty scary because as an onlooker, you're just like, oh, it's getting worse and worse. And you can see that maybe in 20, 30 years, we could have full-blown totalitarianism. Maybe even in 10 years, actually, we could have that. And yeah, I guess for me, it reminds me of the 1930s period. If I read history, that's the period it looks like we're in. What do you think about it all, Mike? Do you have a similar view, or do you think I'm off on that?
No, you know what you just said makes me think of something. And you know, we have a mutual friend who I had the opportunity to speak with this week. We recorded over 2-hour conversation, and you know, we were talking about Epstein and how this is splitting or has splitted the MAGA movement. But you have these quote unquote influencers, media, people in the administration that are saying, you know, this isn't that important. This isn't that important. You know, Trump is doing a lot of good things. And I just think back to, we have no moral compass in this country anymore. Everything is for personal gain. And you're seeing it plain, you know, broad daylight with these people, how they're like, people don't care about this, don't care about this, don't care about this. And, you know, Matt's a mutual friend of ours, and he pointed out, you know, if kids getting killed and raped, trafficked, if that's what we need in order to keep this system going, then I don't want to be a part of this system anymore. And where are people's hard lines? At what point, I mean, do you draw a line in the sand and say, this is it, let the system burn? And again, we have no moral compass in this country. Like, everything is for personal gain. And how can you survive? I mean, how can a country, or just broader the West, how can they survive like that? It's me, 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 me. Everything's a grift. How can I squeeze a little more money out of people? This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group. With Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time. Extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I mean, look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time.
Yeah, it can survive. I think that's the point, is that it can't survive. I mean, the Epstein scandal, it really was a fundamental part of the MAGA movement, you know, because it represented the most disturbing and openly acknowledged and known level of corruption of the swamp, as it was called. That there was these people doing these terrible things, and it involved high-level and high-ranking politicians and maybe people in the arts and the media and academia. All of these people were going across there. So it really was fundamental to the MAGA movement. And the idea was that no justice had been served to these people. And so Trump was going to come in and he was finally going to deliver justice. And that really ignited the passions of this movement, that this guy's coming in, is going to be a savior, he's going to fix it, he's going to restore dignity to America, because we've got this dark stain, or one of them. And, you know, again, it goes back to America's founding principles, that we've all got equality under the law. No one is above the law, not even the government, not even these politicians. And when MAGA voted for Trump, they were ostensibly doing that because they thought that's what he represented. So for now, to have this happen, where you've got all of these influencers and Trump himself saying that you shouldn't care about this, we need to put this to bed. And even worse, that if you actually do care about it, you're a part of the enemy. It's a leftist conspiracy. You're a communist. You know, we don't want you as part of the party if you care about this, and all of the influencers are backing it up. I think it's very disingenuous, and it's quite a scary message, actually, because that is the message of totalitarianism. It's to say that you actually need to follow the party line no matter what. The leader is always right, and you should deny your your truth or what you think's correct. There's actually a book that I would recommend people read. It's called Darkness at Noon, and it's by Arthur Kessler, who was a Hungarian Jew. It was written around 1940, I think. And it was set during the Great Purge in Russia during communism and the Moscow show trials, where they were essentially rounding up anyone who maybe had even the slightest bit of dissent towards the state, or maybe threatened them by being a free thinker. Because in totalitarianism, it's always about getting rid of the thinkers. They don't want anyone who thinks. Thinking is dangerous in a totalitarian state. And I'm not saying America's totalitarian. I'm just drawing comparisons. And yeah, thinking's dangerous. So what they did during the Great Purge was they just rounded up anyone who might think. So you'd be rounded up, Mike. Even if you, let's say, aligned yourself with the party, if you had any critical thought at all, that's it, you'd be gone. And in this story by Kessler, there's a man called Rubashov. He's the main character. And they round him up and basically ask him to confess to a list of crimes that he didn't commit. And they want him to deny truth. They say, just put your name to this. And he's like, well, I never committed them. So the theme of the book is him ruminating over these crimes that he's supposedly committed and what's being asked of him. And his instinctual response is repulsion. Is like, this is terrible. I shouldn't be doing this. But as he goes through these ruminations, he realizes that if I'm a true Bolshevik, if I'm truly dedicated to the party and the cause, I should confess to these crimes. I should deny the truth because the party knows best. And the end goal is always more important than me as an individual, but then or reason or truth. And I think when you get told these things by politicians on the left and the right, that you should deny your thoughts, you should deny what you think's correct, because it's more important that we just move on, we just follow what's the party line. It's worrying, it's worrying that that's where we're at as a society in the West, across both sides of the political spectrum. That under Biden, we saw the same stuff. It was like the Hunter Biden stuff, just forget it. It's not true. It's not real. And it wasn't about finding the truth. It was just about people following what the party told them. And, as somebody who's a rabid individualist, I think that is the opposite end of the spectrum, is individualism, where we all think, we all have dignity. We all look for truth in everything, even if that truth sometimes aligns more with the different side of the political spectrum. It doesn't matter. Truth's more important than following the party line. And it seems to me like America's now on both sides of the spectrum, just people wanting to fit in with the group, and individualism, has been lost. So that's my take on it, Mike. It's worrying time in the West.
Well, and also, I was on Instagram. I think it's Real America's Voice. I don't remember who the news person was, but they were talking about it this morning, of saying, Trump is not on the list. It's a Russia hoax, and Crossfire Hurricane, and so I don't believe he's on the list personally, but I also, if there is even a list, I wouldn't think they'd be dumb enough to actually make a list. Right, to have no record of like an actual list with names on it, but who are the people that participated in this? That's what my concern is. Like, who are the players that were involved? And that's what they're trying to, in my view, trying to make us, like Matt said, these are not the droids you're looking for. These are not the droids you're looking for. And so the mirage, and they're just trying to make this all just go away. So that's what I find so, I'm not surprised, because I didn't have like the optimism that this administration was going to turn any of this around, but yet people are falling for this. Trust Trump, trust the government. Where have you been, man? Where have you been for the last 5 years? Now all of a sudden you trust the government?
Yeah, and it goes back to, the 7 stages of authoritarianism or totalitarianism. The number one is always worship the leader. This man who becomes a myth. He's the savior, he's the father, he's the figure of destiny that's here because of divine providence. And all of that was wrapped up in Trump from the beginning. And so I'm not surprised that this is where we're at, and I'm not surprised at what's happened over the past 6 months. I mean, most people in well, I'd say everyone in MAGA, nobody's voted for anything that's happened thus far, right? Nobody voted for Operation Stargate and 48-hour mRNA vaccines on day number two. Day number two that was announced. And of course, the majority, I would say probably 90+% of MAGA were horrified with what happened with the vaccines. And yet on day number two, they were told, actually, yeah, you're getting more of that. This is part of our policy now. And then we got, what else have we had since then? We also have seen the Palantir database that they've been talking about, building out the surveillance state, and the bombs in Gaza, the bombs in Iran. Nobody voted for any of that, Mike, and yet it's all being passed through. So we are at that point in history where democracy doesn't really matter. It just is about choosing the person that makes you feel the best. Who makes me feel the best, get them into power, and then once somebody's in power, they just kind of run roughshod over the parliamentary process on America. You've got your different levers of power, but really once somebody's in, it's just business as usual. It's the same stuff. It's war, it's corporate greed, it's grift, lots and lots of grift. I mean, Trump was meant to drain the swamp, and then you see him doing the shit coins and the $400 million Qatari jet.
I mean, the shit coin was before he even took office. That was 2 days before. And here's the other thing with all that too, is like people still, and these are people that I personally know, and that, they think like, oh, Trump is being undermined. Trump is being undermined. You know what? Bullshit. Stop giving him a pass. Stop. Like, it's his administration. It's on his watch. I was guilty of it. I gave him a pass. Operation Warp Speed. No. A lot of people have died from that. A lot of people are still dying from it. A lot of people are still getting injured from that. And yet you're going to have people sit up there, it's just like the same ding-dongs that are saying right now, well, nobody cares about the Epstein stuff. Let's focus on all the good things. Pardon my language, fuck you. Fuck you. I mean, where's your principle? Where's your moral compass?
But look, let's look at it from a different perspective, Mike. Let's imagine that everyone in MAGA or who supports Trump, who right now is sat there and has this moral dilemma where they're being asked to essentially forget about something like that. Like I said, it was intrinsically a part of MAGA. It was pushed by Trump. It was pushed by his team. It was pushed by his son. Release the files, Dan Bongino. It was always discussed. It was always a part of the movement, and it was representative of draining the swamp to people who believed it. Let's imagine that people do now say, okay, well, I'm just going to trust the plan. I'm going to trust the plan again. I'm going to forget about it. I'm not going to care about it, even though it involves some of the most heinous stuff you could imagine. What does that actually say about America or the people doing that? What does that mean? I'd say it means that people have just given up thinking entirely. They've just completely given up caring about truth, caring about liberty. And that in and of itself undermines the entire basis of what America supposedly stands for, right? The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. It completely undermines all of it. And once you've done that, well, what is left of America? The left has already given up on all of that, Mike. The left already is quite happy to do away with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So they're happy to get rid of all of that. But the right are the ones who are meant to uphold that. But if they now actually do the same, it's like, yeah, what foundations does America have left to stand on? And then I think you'll see the collapse of America very quickly, because without those foundations, it doesn't matter who you put in power, it's over. It's done for.
Well, and the country deserves what is going to occur. It deserves what's coming. And I think you and I are similar, like-minded in the sense of there is something coming. I don't know what day, I don't know what hour, I don't know what time this is all going to happen, but it's coming. And this Epstein stuff to me, and I was someone that not that I didn't take it seriously, but I also said, I'm like, even if they put a list out tomorrow, nobody's going to believe it. I'm not going to believe it. They could throw out a list with 50 people on it. And you're going to be like, okay, it's been redacted. It's been scrubbed so many times. So, and now they're talking about a special prosecutor. Where is that going to go? I mean, an independent prosecutor that the president is going to appoint that's going to get to the bottom of all this? There's no trust anymore. And you know, who would trust any of these agencies or any of these people? So, you know, the United States deserves this.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really important part, which is trust. We live in a society and Western civilization, moreover, where there's no longer any trust. We don't trust each other. We don't trust the politicians. We don't trust our histories. We don't trust the identity that we was given as a nation. So, you know, on the left especially, they can't stand these narratives that the nations that we live in were founded upon, you know, about liberty and justice and equality. They don't believe that those things even exist anymore. And on the right, we just don't trust anything. So again, I mean, let's imagine that you're in a relationship, Mike. Can you have a healthy, happy marriage without trust, or a relationship with a woman or a man? Of course you can. Can you have a healthy business relationship without trust? Will it survive? Of course it won't survive. So our nations can't survive without trust, and maybe that's what it's all about. Maybe it's about demoralizing us. Maybe it's about undermining our trust and pulling the rug at every opportunity so that we are weak and our foundations have been taken out. You know, if you want to take down a building, for example, you have to start taking out the foundations. And it feels to me like the West is being gutted, and it's happening on both sides. Like, it doesn't matter who we vote in, they both contribute to the demoralization and the erosion of our founding principles. And, you know, even the rule of law seems to me to be going out the window. It's not like we have no legal system left, but it's the law of lawlessness. It's like we have laws, but they're only going to be applied selectively now to you know, they'll be applied to this group but not to that group. And again, that's not what we want. We actually want equality under the law so that everyone will be, you know, subject to the same legal ramifications for crimes. And with the Epstein stuff, we've just been told that actually no, it's not equality under the law. It's if you're a part of this group, we're going to push it under the carpet. But yeah, it's a travesty, really, Mike. And I don't know where this is going to go. I mean, I think it's definitely going to undermine the whole MAGA movement. But thus far, like I said, many of the things that have happened, they didn't vote for or really raise much concern about, anyways. For me, if I was a part of that movement, which I wasn't, I don't align to any political ideology ever, because it's a foolish thing to do. But if I was, on day number 2, when that announcement happened with more mRNA, I would immediately be like, I'm out. You know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. So that would have been me gone. But we've seen this before, and Matt Smith said in his interview with you, will this be the end of MAGA? Probably not. They'll probably, you know, within a week or two, they'll move on. And I think that, again, that's representative of where we are as a society, where our culture's got to, where we've lost, I mean, what's the word? We've lost self-respect for sure, but we've also lost the desire just to be responsible for ourselves. And we just want to hand off that responsibility to these political factions. And yeah, I don't know where it ends up, but I personally think the best thing for us to do as individuals is to exert individualism in our own lives, to get yourself more responsible and take more responsibility for where it matters, rather than trusting that it's all going to come good by voting someone in, because historically speaking, where we are in the cycle, that's unlikely. It's unlikely to happen.
Well, and I think that, you know, having a few days now to reflect on that, you know, I think the MAGA, I don't think it'll end. Now, it might change name at some point, or, you know, some type of new form, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's kind of like it was like when the Tea Party, right? And the Tea Party evolved into the MAGA. I mean, basically, and you know, and I don't know now if it goes into like an America First type of party, but to me, the political side doesn't matter anymore, because we're like the United States is heading. And Europe, same thing. I mean, Australia is already there. We're moving towards more of a surveillance state, and this is something that, you know, I keep referencing in my conversation with Matt. But, you know, referencing, you know, going from the digital ID, when the financial instruments on the digital side, and then the control mechanisms on the digital side, when they merge together, that's when we become totalitarian. And I don't see how you can stop it at this point. As long as we have electricity. I mean, you take the grid down, then it's a whole new game, right? Then it's then it's game on, kill or be killed, and fight to survive. Which I'm in a horrible place if that were to occur, because it's going to be 109 in Arizona today, and I mean, people were smart. They just wait this out because 95% of the population would be dead within 2 days, and you can come in and take whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah, you need to move, Mike.
You're not the first person that's told me that.
We need to do a GoFundMe. Move Mike Farris out of Arizona.
Give me one of those pods. Give me one of those pods that I can jump in and get out of here. Well, it's I don't mean to cut you off, but I was on the road for 5.5 weeks on the East Coast of the country, and you've seen parts of it that I'd never seen before. I was in North Carolina and Virginia and upstate New York, and I got to visit my friend Melody Wright and Dave Collum and Jim Kunstler, who are all regulars on here. And man, you see all the rain and the greenery, and just being away from cities, and then I come back here and it's it was 118 last Wednesday here, and just brown, just bleh.
Yeah, I see. I'd struggle with that. I really like the seasons. I like to be around forests and lakes. I mean, I absolutely love the mountains, but yeah, I chose a place where there's lots and lots of forests. It's one of the least populated places in the country. And I really get a kick out of going out for a run, go out for an hour, 2 hours, and you don't see another human being at all. You can throw a dart at the map and just go running a certain location around here, and you won't see nobody. There's never a person. If you do, you kind of scare each other because you don't expect to see one another. And I think that's probably my expression of individualism, is just to try and detach a little bit from the main structures of society, because I think it's a healthy thing to do. It gives you back in a lot of ways some self-respect and dignity, because you're doing things for yourself, and we can't control a lot of what's happening. As much as we like to think we can vote somebody in and it's going to stop the descent and the decline, I think it's gone past the critical point now, and the powers that be are pushing us towards something. And you said this earlier on, we're going towards something. We're not sure what it is, but we can see that there's a big molding happening of the mass mind, of people at the mean. And if you're a little bit more of a thinker and you look back at history and cycles, then you're not a part of that mass mind. So you're kind of watching on, and it's like watching a slow moving car crash. You're like, oh God, I can see where this is going. I can see it's not good. And you don't want to see the end of it. So, we're trying to, I guess, create some kind of life for ourselves where whatever happens, we're going to have at least the most dignity, the most freedom, and the best shot of surviving it. Whether it is the grid down, societal collapse, roving mobs, it's like, well, okay, that's not a good future. I don't want to, that's not a great place to be in the city, or in Arizona if the water's cut out and you can't fend for yourselves in terms of getting your essentials like food, water, and energy. And also, if that doesn't happen, if actually it just keeps chugging along, but we go towards what I think is going to happen, which is like a Great Depression, Great Air Depression, as Doug Casey calls it, where we just see this massive washout of the financial system, and then we see them install that technocratic control system really fast, really quickly. And I think all the infrastructure for it's already there, Mike, so they can just immediately switch it over. People today think, oh, I've got Bitcoin, the blockchain, it's all safe, I've got privacy. It's like, no, no, no. At any point, they can just flip that over to the control side of that system with surveillance, with the mega databases, the Palantir, the Oracle, and the AI systems that will be applied on top of that. And the next thing you know, if you don't follow the party line, it's no longer a case of you get told by the politician you're not a part of the club. It's like, no, now your bank account doesn't work. It's like, the truckers' protest, it's like your bank account's not working. If you look at what's happening in Europe right now, they're planning for an asset registry across the entirety of Europe, where they want everything that you own, all of your bank accounts, all of your pension, your assets, your trusts. If you've got any trusts, that'll go in there too. also, it's not just the financialized assets, like stocks, bonds, bank accounts. It's also your physical assets they want to put in there. So if you've got any gold, if you've got a safety deposit box, if you've got artwork, they want everything to go into this asset registry. And then you are completely controlled because once all that's put onto the blockchain and they tokenize it, not only can they kind of block your bank account and stop you from transacting or switch off your digital money, which will exist in one form or another, they can also start applying fines to you. And if you don't pay them, they can say, well, we know what you've got, Mike. We can see you've got 5 ounces of gold hidden under the floorboards. It's tokenized. So now the ownership of that's being transferred over to us. So you might have the physical asset, but we're going to turn up at your house and take it because you didn't pay the fines. That's kind of the level they can achieve now with tokenization and blockchain and smart contracts. Excuse me. So, yeah, I think it's going in a really scary direction. And I think if we go to the societal collapse, yeah, maybe we don't get the totalitarian control grid, but we've got our own problems to deal with then. And if we go the other way and we don't have that full-on collapse, we just have this kind of switchover, which will still have all the elements of a collapse in terms of like a massive loss of jobs and people losing their pensions and becoming completely dependent on UBI. But that will then make them prime subjects for the totalitarian control grid because if you're dependent, they can easily coerce you to joining it. So that's the kind of the two options I see. And the third option, I guess, is to try and prepare for those outcomes. And that's to become a little bit more self-sufficient, to grow some food, to find other people who are more individualist and not trying to find political solutions, and then try and ride it out. And hopefully the system itself will eventually collapse from its own hubris, which usually happens, but it takes time. Could take 10 years, could take 15 years, could take 5 years. But during that period where it exists and they're trying to implement these things, you need to have some degree of separation so that you're not forced into what would be, my friend Havroy Morich of Geopolitics and Empires calls it the algorithm ghetto. It's not a physical ghetto anymore, it's a digital one, and you can just be pushed into it because they've got access to all of your financial accounts and information and your digital ID, your real ID you've got over there in America right now. So that could be, thrown into that as well. So yeah, the algorithm ghetto is coming at us, I think.
Well, and I like that. I hadn't heard that one before. I had Paul Craig Roberts on yesterday with Gary Haven, and I put the clip on my Substack because Paul said, he said, the digital revolution is the second dumbest thing in human history behind the nuclear weapon. And he got real fired up about it. But, he said, he goes, the real people that are going to be in control, because I have mentioned this many times, how I think the New World Economic Forum, he actually went to, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he worked under Reagan, Treasury Secretary. He invented supply side economics in the 80s. And he went to Davos with Kissinger. He was talking about that yesterday at my show.
What was his name, Mike?
Paul Craig Roberts.
I recognize the name, but yeah, that's crazy. And you had him on the show?
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah. I've had him on a bunch, but we were talking about the digital revolution. He was all fired up. It was like the dumbest thing, second dumbest thing in human history behind the nuclear weapon. And one of the things he said that really kind of stuck in my mind, I'm going to share this with Matt, is the people that are really going to be in control, because I've always, the Peter Thiels, the Elon Musk, the whole tech bros, but the hackers, because these things are all hackable. The hackers are who are going to ultimately be in control, because they'll find new ways to get into these systems and either take them down or, freeze them or whatever, hold them hostage. So the hackers could be at the top of the food chain of all this.
Yeah, well, historically, over the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, they have all been scooped up by the NSA and by different intelligence services to work for them, not only to improve the cybersecurity of intelligence services, because, of course, your data is gold. If somebody gets into your intelligence services data, you're done for. And the US has been fantastic at this. I don't know if you know the story of Crypto AG, which was a company that spawned out of World War II. So it was a company that specialized in cryptography, or a team. And during World War II, they cracked Enigma. And that enabled them to look at what was happening in terms of the Axis Power's communications. They thought it was secret. They thought it was cryptographically unbroken, but secretly it was broken, and it was watching the communications. And of course, once that happens, you're toast. If you think you're doing something in secret and your enemy and opponent can actually read it, then you're done for. And then after World War II ended, Crypto AG spawned off into its own company, and it was based out of Switzerland. And what they did was start creating cryptographic devices and selling them to intelligence services. And this company grew massively in terms of popularity amongst all of the different intelligence services across the world. They were all using Crypto AG machines. And this went on for decades and decades. And by the time you got to the 1970s, 80s, around 60% of all political cables went through Crypto AG machines. That's how ubiquitous their machines were in the intelligence services. The only problem was the entire time it was a CIA front. It was the US secretly controlling Crypto AG, the company. They controlled the entire company. All of the devices that they were giving to intelligence services were cracked from the beginning. So America could watch all of these political cables and decode them. And eventually the NSA, once they were spawned out of the CIA, and it was the OSS before that, they took over the operations of it. And so cryptography has always been an obsession of the elites and of intelligence services, going back hundreds of years. If you go back 500 years, 1,000 years, sending encrypted messages and ensuring that your own messages are not decrypted was just an obsession because it's so important. So of course the hackers have always been, co-opted and brought in. And whenever you see a hacker, let's say, working against the state or trying to break their systems apart, they come down on them like a ton of bricks. And usually they get a plea deal. So they'll say, listen, we won't put you in jail for 50 years, but you come work for us. And that's usually where they end up. So yeah, I think the hackers will definitely have some advantages in this system. If you understand these things, even if you're not, let's say, hacking government databases, I think you'll have a huge advantage in trying to navigate the systems that are coming. But ultimately, it will be very hard to take part in society, let's say civil society, unless you put yourself in the systems. So it's going to be a case of, do you want to be in the system? Well, you can't be in the system without a digital ID, without the digital wallet. And even if they say, well, you can have Bitcoin in there or private coins, they'll be able to watch over the system from above. So it's not like it will be truly private. They can still, they'll still be able to view what's going on. And I'd say it's probably already like that. They wouldn't be pushing these things if it wasn't the case. Or you can be outside the system. But if you're outside the system, you ain't going to the city hall. They ain't going to let you in the building. You ain't going to use the supermarkets because your digital ID, you need to get in now. You need to have facial recognition. You need to be in the system. You're not getting any benefits. So if you lose your job, you ain't getting UBI unless you put yourself in the system. And then all of a sudden you find that actually you've got two really stark choices. You're either fully controlled in the system or you're outside the system and you have to fend for yourself financially and literally, potentially, in terms of food, water, and energy. And yeah, that's not an easy set of choices, is it?
No, and that's what individuals have to ask themselves is, all right, how do I want to live? Right? Do I want to live the way, go into the system and be able to do the things that I want to do, or do you want to fight it within your own little sphere? And it's going to be very uncomfortable, very difficult. I want to ask you though, kind of in relation, did they lower the age requirements in Europe for voting? Do you know about that?
Yeah, I saw that myself. So in Great Britain, they've lowered it to 16.
16.
16.
And what is it? I'm sure they're justifying the reason for that, but what is the underlying reason? Just because they can doctor the voting that much more?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they're going to justify it. I guess they're saying, well, the age of consent for sex is 16, so why not vote in? But this is a dichotomy in a sense, because of course they're sexualizing young people massively in the West, but they're also infantilizing them in terms of their ability to think critically. They're definitely indoctrinating them on a mass scale. So it's going to be far easier for them to get the vote for radical left policies because that's mainly the kind of indoctrination young people are going for. And I think in the West, it's a little bit different, at least in the UK, than it is in America. I think in the UK, most young people are far left. So just stop oil, uh, carbon, CO2, sorry, and the climate scam, racial equality and discrimination and anti-colonialism, anti-white. So all of that stuff's kind of wrapped up with young people. And I think if you want to take society to a much more totalitarian type system, it's on the left in the UK. So they're going to need a lot more young people voting for those policies. As the older generations, people our age are actually going the opposite direction. If they're going to vote, they're going to vote right. So I think it's to try and counteract that increased dissatisfaction amongst the older generations who are much more likely now to maybe vote for a Donald Trump type character, a Nigel Farage, and they're recognizing that and they're realizing, well, if we get young people to vote, we can keep it on the left side of the political spectrum where we've got much more ability to increase the dictatorial elements of this, because the UK is out in front when it comes to censorship. It's wild over there. People being arrested for tweets, put in jail for 2-3 years for a tweet, when you've got people stabbing people who are being let off after 6 months or not going to jail at all. It's a really scary kind of state apparatus that they've built in the UK. And if you want to push that further, you need people to keep voting for the left side of the spectrum. Because I think on the right, whether you say both sides are going to take us to the same point eventually anyways, it will slow certain aspects down.
Well, and I think too, it's hearing you describe that, and it makes me think, why would Putin want Europe? You have these people that are obsessed that Putin wants to take over. He's going to move into Poland, and then he's going to eventually conquer through Europe. Why would you want that? That's more of a headache. Though there's nothing there for him. What is in Europe that he would want? Pasta in Italy? Like what?
Commodities? I mean, Russia's got more commodities than it could ever need. So this is again, it's kind of
oil. There's no oil in Europe.
It's a fiction, right? It's a historical fiction when we had economies that were, I mean, if you go back to the 1920s, the 1910s, every nation had to be a self-sufficient unit because we didn't have globalization. So every nation had to provide for itself enough energy, enough food, enough jobs for the people even. Also, we had very fractured relationships between nations as it came to trading. So a lot of it was tariffing, similar to what's happening now, actually. And I guess Trump's tariffs are taking us back towards that protectionism and that insular kind of economy. But with globalization, you don't need any of that. And in any case, Russia's already got everything that it needs. It's got the most complete commodity profile on planet Earth. So it doesn't need to have other nations' territory to provide enough food for itself, or enough energy, or enough oil, or minerals, or rare earths. It doesn't need that. I mean, you could argue that some nations do. Some nations do, but they don't have the power to go and take it from other nations. So, yeah, I think it's just a historical fiction that now we would have the nations marauding and saying, we're going to come in there and steal all your stuff. It's like, no. I think today it's a different system that we've got. Although, you could argue that America's doing a lot of that right now with the tariffs. They are trying to get nations to give them favorable trading deals. But even then, I don't see America kind of invading Greenland, as some people suggested, or Canada. It's unlikely, very unlikely.
Yeah, you don't even hear about Greenland anymore. That was like the first thing in the first couple of weeks, Greenland and what was the other one? Wasn't another country they were talking about that taken over? There was so much noise in the beginning of all this. Doge was going to save trillions of dollars. That's already. I mean, it looks like Elon got out right at the right time of this sinking disaster.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that was interesting that he managed to just get out. But nowadays, if you want to control a nation, you do it by subverting the country. You put a puppet in power. If we look back at the history of, let's say, Iran or one of these countries, it was basically a case of get a puppet on the throne. It was to put somebody in power. in Iran from like the early 1900s, it was always a Western asset that was on the seat of power. Before, you had the original family, the Shah of Iran before the ones that people look to today, the Reza Pahlavi Shah. Before his family got in power, it was another dynasty, and that dynasty was pretty autonomous. And when the Westerners came along and started prospecting for oil in Iran, what they said to them was, listen, we'll find the oil and we'll give you, I think it was something like 20% of all revenues for any oil that we find. So that's how the oil industry got up and running in Iran. But once they did find oil, the ruling dynasty, after like 15, 20 years, said, well, we're only getting 20%. This is our oil in our nation. So the West just said, okay, well, let's renegotiate. And the renegotiation from them was, we want 50%. And the Western side of the renegotiation was, get rid of you guys and we'll put a puppet in. And we're keeping the arrangement the same. And anytime anyone wanted to renegotiate, they just got rid of them. That's the easiest way of extracting from another country, is to install your corporations and just overthrow anyone that tries to renegotiate. I mean, that's what we saw in Latin America too, when they created all of the banana republics. They didn't care who they put in power, whether it was a dictator or, the one thing they didn't want in power was anyone that would take the assets back from the Western corporations and nationalize an industry or hand it back. But I guess a question, Mike, is, can America maintain that going forwards? Can they maintain this ability to force nations as far afield as Africa and, the Middle East and South America to always follow American corporate diktats and give America these favorable relationships? I don't think they can. And I think that's why the tariffs are actually mainly aimed at American allies who depend on America for defense, because America's realizing that the world's changing fast, and with BRICS rising, a lot of these nations are going to align with BRICS, and maybe they're going to feel safe enough to do that now because China and Russia are working together, that America is going to lose a lot of these cheap commodities that it used to get. So maybe that's a part of the narrative too. But yeah, I just don't see nations overtaking nations and actually installing themselves there. You couldn't achieve that. I mean, the native population would revolt, and yeah, it's just more of a fantasy.
Well, and also too, is the bigger play here, the United States trying to isolate China and weaken them by, like, for example, of Iran, how much oil do they provide to China? And you're right, like, and, Matt and I were talking about this, a couple of days ago as well, where it was, so I don't want to take credit like I came up with this on my own. I'm a really good listener, so I have people smarter than me on that share that open my eyes to this. Hence, that's why we're talking today, Mike. But maybe the goal here is you take Iran, you disrupt it, not by militarily invading, because that's long, drawn out, costly, and I don't know. The United States military doesn't have the equipment or weapons to be able to do that, but. And I think back to when he warned Tehran to evacuate, right? That's a population, Tehran holds, I think, 2 to 3 million people. They just can't all leave, but maybe that was incentive for them to try to overthrow that government and turn that country into chaos. Hence, then cutting off the oil supply to China. Is that the real goal here? Hurt them?
I think it's definitely one of the goals. Yeah, definitely one of the goals. I mean, if we look at everything that's happening in the world, it's building up to a greater conflict with China, and it's escalated massively since Trump 2.0 began. I mean, during the first Trump presidency, we had tariffs and we saw an escalation of conflict, but it was mainly economic conflict. But once we got to the first Biden presidency, where, we saw the Ukraine and Russia conflict kick off, that was definitely a proxy conflict, because Russia is the junior partner to China, and together they're making big strides in recreating the monetary order towards something that's going to be less centralized around America and the dollar. And it's really gold that's being used to try and facilitate that. But also they did include in kind of their plans for a new system, commodities. Now, a lot of the world's commodities are held by nations that are in Latin America, in Africa. So if all of a sudden you're creating a system that's going to give them a fairer shot in life than what they had before, they're going to detach from America, they're going to nationalize the mines, they're going to kick out Western corporations, and they're going to join BRICS. And that was really America's worry. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen America really pivot towards India, for example. With some of the people they've put in, you've got JD Vance, his wife's from India, I think, and they've certainly made more space for India because they were aligning closer to BRICS. So there's a lot of geopolitical wrangling going on. The proxy war with Russia was one of them. Weakened Russia repeatedly, so they're preoccupied there and they can't advance their agenda with China as much. And now you've got the tariffs, which are definitely mainly focused at China. Not completely, because a lot of the things, like I said, are about America preparing itself for a period of major conflict and decoupling in the world, where you're going to have lots and lots of commodities go offline. There's going to be lots and lots of nations that are actually going to have to pick a side. Do you side with America or do you side with BRICS? And nobody knows where the dice will fall on that. If you look at Spain, for example, a European nation, but they're refusing to take part in America's plans with NATO. They're refusing to spend 5% of GDP. They were told by Scott Bessent, if you move closer to China, it will be like slitting your own throat. The next day, the president of Spain flew across to China and signed some deals with Xi Jinping. A few weeks after that, all of the lights went out in Spain. Was that really due to green energy issues, or was it actually some kind of warning shot? Scott Bessent did say something along those lines. So there's a lot of stuff happening in the world. It's a period of, I would say, organized chaos. And China and the US, to me, that's the scariest part of it for us, is it feels like it's building up to a much bigger conflict between them. We're seeing all of the steps that took place going into other major conflicts, and economic warfare often turns into kinetic warfare. So yeah, it's I agree with what you're saying, and I don't know how you get the train back on the tracks at this point. It feels feels like it's derailing. And the one thing that gets me as well, Mike, is you don't really see anyone arguing for common sense. There's not many rational voices out there. They're all extreme in their opinions. On one side, like for example, China. Okay, maybe America and China are going to have some kind of conflict, but escalating the kinetic side when you've got two massive nuclear powers, and if you put China in a situation where they are kind of forced into combat, like, that's not good for anyone. Even America, it would be suicide for America too. Even if they won, it wouldn't be good for America, because lots of lives would be lost in this day and age where you've got the kind of weaponry and arsenals. And even then, like, forget about the kinetic weapons like nuclear bombs and missiles. You've got the cyber capabilities of these countries. One single cyber attack could bring down the entire energy system of a country. And within a week, that country is Mad Max. You've got millions of people dying. Let's imagine you live in a block of flats. You're on floor number 20. If the water goes out, what are you going to do? Carry water up every day that you found from some gutter or sewer to your 20th floor apartment? I mean, yeah, it's not even a case of kinetic warfare anymore, Mike. It's the cyber capabilities of countries. And I think they're far more advanced than any of us actually know. Then you've got biological weapons. One biological weapon could wipe out an entire country. You don't even have to send men off to fight. So I think when you look at it from those perspectives, it's a case of, de-escalation is what's needed, but nobody really speaks about that anymore. It's a dirty word, I think. So that's another worry for me, is that nobody is arguing for a more stable and peaceful world. It's more destabilization.
Paul was talking about yesterday, you don't do what you're told, you don't do what the establishment tells you. You get a call, or the men in black will just show up. He kept saying the men in black, and I go, who's the men in black? He goes, it doesn't matter who they are. And Spain, maybe they got a visit from the men in black, and hence the power went out. Talking about Epstein, Trump might have got a visit from the men in black, whoever that is. The men in black could be domestic and it could be international, where he was explaining, like, if you talk bad about Israel, your political career is over in Washington, D.C. If you go against Big Pharma, you might get, he said he experienced it at his time in D.C. It's a really interesting conversation when he was talking about all that, because, he had got part of the budget under Reagan, gotten it through, and they didn't want it. The establishment didn't want that to go through. They didn't want them to push it, and they did. He did, and didn't even get invited to the signing when it got passed into law. And he said that was a message that my career was over in D.C. Like I didn't even
Which is probably the best outcome for him because it could be even worse, right?
Right. And he said, you don't know how the men in black will reach out to, it'd be phone or, there's various ways it can happen. But, yeah. And also, what I find really interesting too, that not a lot of people are talking about is the fact that, even just this week, I think it was this week, the DOD took a stake in Grok. The Department of Defense is obviously seeing value in Grok, that they're taking a stake in it. They're also involved in MP Materials, a rare earth mining company based out in Las Vegas. That same company, MP Materials, Apple just pumped in $500 million to them this week or last week. So now you've got the DOD that's taking upon themselves the initiative to just move forward with investments.
But there you go. I mean, this
centralizing
isn't free markets either, is it?
They're
this
centralizing.
Is
not to interrupt.
Command and control economy.
Well, they're centralizing everything, right? Like that's where, like healthcare is being centralized. Law enforcement agencies. I believe the ATF is now underneath Homeland Security. I don't know what other domestic agencies are a part of that, but that they're centralizing everything, and it looks like it's mirroring something similar to what China has. Healthcare. Kennedy's talking about those wearables. Like by the end of this administration, people will be wearing those wearables to be able to detect, heartbeat or heart rates and ironically, the Surgeon General nominee owns a wearables company. Go figure.
Oh man. But this is it. It's if I don't know if you ever read Klaus Schwab's book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, or he had another book called The Great Reset. This is precisely what they was talking about. They was talking about having the Internet of Bodies and the Internet of Things, and they said the wearables are a key part of that because that will take your data, your biological data, what's happening in your body. But they said that's the first stage of this evolution. The next stage is transhumanism, where the wearables actually become implantables. So it's stuff inside of your body that's going to monitor what's happening with your heart, what's going to monitor your blood, your respiration. And everything that's happening in the West is going towards that too. This idea that Trump's administration is going against Klaus Schwab and the globalists, it's like, well, the wearables and Operation Stargate and the AI and the data centers and Palantir database, it doesn't appear to me to be anything different. It doesn't appear to me to be going in the direction of individualism and liberty. It feels to me like just the same stuff rebranded. And so I think, again, it's like, what options are people really being given? It's that you can either have what they want on the left or what they want on the right. Same directions, essentially. We'll end up in the same place at the end of the day. And it's again, I find it hard to be optimistic about all of these ideas. I mean, because I don't want wearables, Mike. I mean, I used to use a watch when I was running years ago, and it was fantastic. It was really useful when I was a competing athlete because it gave me real-time information that wasn't necessarily useful then, but I'd go home, I'd feed it into my computer, and I'd look back at what my heart rate was doing in a workout, and I could chart my progression. And that was useful. It was useful for my training, but would I want that to all be going to the government? To some massive database where
Probably already is.
Precisely.
Probably already is.
It would be. Yeah, I think so. That's why I don't use them anymore. Would I want all of my intimate, personal, biological details to be on a database somewhere? Absolutely not. And we've got to really ask questions about these things because Kennedy put this forward, but did he discuss the risks? Did he discuss the risk to privacy or what? Even if you trusted Kennedy and Trump, what about if a new president gets in power who is totalitarian and just takes all this data and weaponizes it against you? That's always the risk. It doesn't matter if you like the person in power now, the next person could be a totalitarian. So if you build out all of this digital infrastructure and the blockchain and smart contracts and NFTs and tokenization, once that infrastructure is there, it ain't going anywhere. It's kind of like once you install traffic lights in a society. Once they're there, they're there. You can't remove them. The whole of society now shapes around these things. Or, you know, the mobile phone or the personal vehicle. Once they're installed in society, society then shapes around it. So you can't remove them. And that's what's going to happen with the digital infrastructure. So I don't actually celebrate any of it. Like, I don't want a private digital currency. I don't want a public digital currency. I don't want wearables. I don't want databases. Even if they're freedom databases, I don't want them. I don't want the smart cities. Call them liberty cities, whatever you want. I don't want them, because I think at some point the switch will be flipped and they will become tools of tyranny. And yeah, I advocate not for that, for the opposite.
Do you see at this point though that this thing gets stopped or slowed down even? Because I don't.
No, I think it's I don't think, like I said, I don't think there's any resistance to the big agendas that are happening. There's not. I think they're very good at making sure there's not much resistance. And yeah, I mean, you know, technology can't be stopped in a sense. It's very difficult. If you go back to the Industrial Revolution, there was the Luddites who would go into the factories and start smashing up all of the machines because they understood that it would put a lot of people out of work. You can't really do that with AI. You know, we can't stop AI. There's no factories to go into, and the Luddites failed anyways. And technology does, you know, it advances. It just advances. You can't stop it in a sense because yeah, it's part of human evolution that we learn and we grow and we apply these teachings to society. I mean, what are you going to do? Force people to stop progressing technologically? That's impossible, because another nation will advance technologically. Like if you, and I think this is a part of it. Like even if you are a liberty-minded country, let's say America is wanting to give people liberty, and it wants to retain that and freedoms and independence. But then you've got another nation like China who's creating biological weapons and cyber capabilities and more efficiency in terms of its transactions by using new currencies and new ways of commerce that are based on the blockchain and tokenization. If you stand still, there is a huge risk that in 10 years, 15 years, they are so far ahead in these technologies that they just wipe you out. That they just send a nano swarm to your country and it just eviscerates you all. I mean, that was the arms race with the nuclear bomb. So in a sense, nations are forced to enter a digital arms race, even if they wouldn't want to, even if it was against them. And that's a key part of what's happening in the world too. That's why in Russia, they're doing these things. You know, Russia's got face pay in Moscow. Russia is definitely a part of the kind of agenda in all of this stuff. I don't see it not taking place anywhere. I think everyone will take part, and it will just be a one-upmanship, just like in the Cold War, of trying to advance these technologies until you get to a point where you have a really totalitarian-esque system. Whether they like it or not, it's going to get there. And, you know, the biblical beast system can arise at that point where you can be locked out entirely of civil society. And I don't see another way of stopping that. I mean, the only way is to try and create a life for yourself where if that did happen, if it is successful, then you can still retain as many freedoms as possible. I mean, you speak about Matt, and with Matt, he's got a farm over there in Uruguay. I think, you know, that's part of it, right? It's like if I've got a farm, even if that's existing in the city, over on my farm, I can be more free. I can have food that's not genetically modified, that's healthier. I can have water that's not got poisons in it coming from a well. And it's retaining as many freedoms as possible until that system collapses, because a system like that will definitely collapse. I mean, if you go back to communism, it was based around cybernetics and ideas around controlling everything from to the most micro level. You know, every single transaction, every single food quota and quota for oil and energy, and all of it was controlled, centralized, and it always fails. But when it fails, it can fail pretty catastrophically, and then you can have a dark ages for 500 to 1,000 years after that. It's happened many times in history.
Well, that's why too, you know, I hear this talk of civil war, and, you know, usually with the older generation and, you know, the 1776 moment. And where I don't see. I mean, people thought last year like the election wasn't going to occur and there was going to be a civil war, and I never bought into that narrative. And the question that I ask myself is, who are you going to fight? To your point, like, you're going to take your gun and go where? Like, who are you going to shoot? You're going up against technology. Okay, let's say Jeff Bezos was gone tomorrow, or Elon Musk or Peter Thiel. These are corporations. Like, there's somebody just right there in line stepping in to make sure that the machine keeps turning. I mean, did you watch that Peter Thiel interview from about a month ago, where he was talking about transhumanism and
the Antichrist?
yes, yeah. That clip was going around, but the whole interview was good. I mean, I don't know if good is the right word, but just seeing like how sick these people are.
Yeah, I did watch it, and I think he hit on some really important points around the beast system and the propensity for that to now arise. I think the technology is already there. I think the infrastructure is already there. The only thing that's not there really is the legal infrastructure. Like, they haven't changed the laws to allow that to fully manifest, but all it would take is the right crisis. Then laws could change overnight. If you have, let's say have an economic collapse, which I think we're heading towards. Once you have an economic collapse and the pension system's gone, and people can't fund themselves, they can't survive retirement. Most Americans have less than 2 months saving in the bank, Mike. 2, 3 months, and they're gone. If the currency disappears, it's 0 months. And if you take away the retirements of the people who do have assets, most of it's in financialized assets, stocks and bonds, which will collapse with the system. So now you've got a society of people that have nothing, that are very, very dependent and need bailing out. Well, then all of a sudden you say, well, listen, guys, we'll bail you out. And you can switch over to the new system immediately because it's already ready to go. Like I said, the only thing stopping it really is the legal part of it, which can easily be changed. So, yeah, I think you could easily create that system. And I don't think it would immediately look like a system out of Revelations where you can't buy or sell. I think it would look like a rescue package where, we're saving the system and this is the way to save it. And then, of course, at some point, it would start to be weaponized against the populace if they started to dissent. And you'd make a very obedient society that way. Same as in China, with the social credit system. That, it's not marketed to the people as a tool of control. It's marketed as something that's going to be good for you in society. It's going to make it happier and healthier, and people will stop disobeying breaking laws and crossing the road in the wrong place. And if you are good, yeah, fantastic. You get your points going up. So I think it'll be the same in the West. And I think young people will embrace it. The young generation, they don't want freedoms. They don't want freedoms. They want things to be orderly. They want it to be like the vision in their mind of what a utopia looks like. And to do that, you need a centralized authority controlling things, and they'll accept it. We might not, but listen, Mike, we're not long for this world. We're past it now. We're going to be retiring, and we might see the back end of it, but it's the young people that you need to convince. And I think most of them are convinced already.
I agree. I also think, though, if I forgot how far apart you and I are age. I'm 47.
Yeah, I'm in my early 40s.
Okay, so what are we, 4 or 5 years apart, 6 years apart, something like that?
Yeah.
But you were still part of the generation that played outside.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we were. I don't know where the cutoff would be from that. Like, what on the top end, like how many years above me? Well, probably many years above me, but how many years below me where that included the last generation of kids to play outside. And I think that as we're moving into this new, and I agree with you on all of this, it's going to be the toughest for people our age because we knew a better time. The younger generation didn't know any different, right? They grew up with these devices that were, they're glued to their eyes are, I mean, they're getting brainwashed by these things. They walk across the street in busy intersections looking at their phones. They don't talk. Communication's been absolutely destroyed in the world because of these things. They're supposed to be, you can call somebody, but nobody picks up the phone. You have to text message. They don't play outside. They play video games. Paul was talking about that yesterday, which talking about the second stupidest idea behind the nuclear weapon is the digital revolution. You can't call anybody for customer service. And if you do, you get somebody in like Indonesia. If you happen to get a live voice. And, it's gonna be a struggle for our generation. Now, I think for you and I, it might be a little bit easier because we talk about all this stuff all the time. We're paying attention to things, so we're a little more in tune than the blissfully unaware. I don't know. I don't know how the blissfully unaware are going to react when this thing really takes a hold.
They'll be crushed. Yeah, they'll be crushed, and they'll have to do whatever they have to do to survive. And I think propaganda will always win with the masses, that whatever they're told, they'll just follow and believe. And, the blame's going to be put somewhere else. It always is. So I think they'll have to have some big narrative to cover over the collapse of the financial system, because they're not going to say, well, we did this because we allowed debt to get out of control and we hyper financialized everything and kept spending too much. So something will have to happen there. And I think the masses will probably, out of fear, just go along with it. Because if you find out that you're completely eviscerated financially, there's nothing, and you've got two days worth of food in the fridge and it's over. You're going to accept whatever deal's offered to you at that point, especially if they make it attractive. And like you said, the young people, yeah, they'll definitely go along with it because they don't really have much opportunity in life anyways. What do they have really on offer right now? They can go to university or college, as you call it in the US, and get themselves into massive amounts of debt. They can buy a house at 15 times the average salary, massive amounts of debt.
They can't afford a
and
house.
then they can look at the.
They can't
Go
afford
ahead,
it.
Mike.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They can't afford it. I mean, that's a pipe dream
Exactly.
to most people now. Unless parents can finance it or provide the down payment, they can't afford it. And there was I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but somebody pointed out to me that there's a podcast where this guy Benjamin Boyce was interviewing a younger person, and I'm kind of I guess I'm at the forefront of it, being 47, because I don't own a house here in Arizona. I don't own a house, and it's not an unusual thing now for people not to own because it's so expensive.
Yeah, so expensive. And if you look at places like Canada and Australia, it's insane. The bubbles in property. And I would say even in the UK and most of Europe, in Western Europe at least, and America, if we do have that collapse, then the property prices are going to fall. And if you've got a mortgage on it, then yeah, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Unemployment during the Great Depression, officially it was around 15%. Probably unofficially it was much higher because they cooked the books on everything. So yeah, it will be really hard times. And I would say the hopeful thing is, I think as people start to see what we're seeing, I mean, there's a lot of smart people out there, and they're watching this and they're probably thinking, yeah, I don't like where this is going, and I can tell it's getting worse financially and fiscally. And I think there's a lot more people that are starting to come up with solutions, and they're going back to really simple ways of living. They're going back to the old ways. They're planting gardens, they're moving to homesteads. Especially after 2020, there was a huge kind of renaissance in this kind of thinking. And so you're going to see increasingly there's just a huge divide. There's going to be people who are going completely the opposite direction, and then there's going to be people who are completely beholden to the system and the new technologies. And at some point, it's going to kind of be like meeting a person from another planet. If those two people meet, the paradigms of life are going to be so different, because one is hyper independence and self-responsibility, and the other one is hyper dependence and trusting the system. And it will be very hard for those people to even communicate. And I think young people are going to be born in those societies. I mean, I went to visit a group recently, and they were living basically outside the system. I mean, they're still close to cities, they can go out and stuff, but they live in the forest, they have natural home birds, they grow all of their own food. And those kids are now being raised in that environment, and they're being taught that actually there's a different version of history, and this is what real food looks like as a comparison to this Franken food, and this is what real medicine is compared to the farmer stuff. So you're going to have some really cool and interesting kids being brought up, and they're going to be building communities. They're going to be off grid and outside the system. And then you're going to have people that are completely in the system, and it will be very different paths. And I guess at this point, you either bury your head in the sand, or you start to take control of things and make your own path in life. And yeah, there's not really many options for us all. I think wherever you are in the world, you're going to have issues. There are going to be better places than others. you definitely need to think about the financial side of things, because if you're dependent on a pension, it's not going to be there, like, to be blunt. And so get yourself out of debt, start to downsize if you have to. You said you don't have a house, Mike. That can actually be the perfect scenario. You could get yourself a camper. You could, buy a little plot of land. It gives you freedom. It gives you options to move and to not be completely beholden to one place. So yeah, I think there's always hope and there's always solutions, but the solutions, the further you go into it, just get more radical. It's better to do it earlier than later, because if you're trying to do it last minute, then it might have to be radical, or it might not even be possible. The door closes and you're just stuck in your situation. And that's the worst place to be, where you've got no options. That's when dependency really sets in.
Yeah, and do you think it'll be an accelerated collapse, or do you think it'll be more the slow burn?
I think we're in the slow burn bit now, but it's accelerating. And I think at some point it is a suddenly. The gradually, suddenly is how it happens always.
Yeah, it's like we're Jerry Springer right now, man. I mean, it's, talking about UFC at the White House, and I put it on X yesterday, or the day before. I said, we don't get the Epstein files, but at least we're getting a UFC fight at the White House. I'm like, are you tired of winning?
Yeah, the bread and circuses part, right? Because you've got to distract people, whilst it comes down, and you have to give narratives to justify some of the things that are happening. I mean, you can't. I mean, the Epstein files thing, to me, it's a bit of a sideshow. It's representative of something serious, which is, like I said, the loss of truth and justice and some of the founding principles of America. But it was always going to end this way, in my opinion, with something that was never true justice for what happened. Because what you're going to do, nations engage in these things, blackmail, and it's kind of the dark arts of intelligence, and it does happen. It does happen. I think it's happened throughout history. I think it's the reason why most of the spies during World War II for Britain were gay. They chose gay men, and I think it was because they wanted men that couldn't be seduced by foreign intelligence assets who were female, and also because it was illegal still at the time. So they wanted to have something over them, like, we can give you what you want, but it's but if you go against us, then you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. So I think it's always been a part. The problem is, of course, it's gotten much darker and more perverted and gross. So yeah, I mean, what can you say, Mike? It's getting dark in terms of the overall picture that we're discussing, and maybe that's what always happens in history at this point. It just gets really bad, really dark, and then you have the collapse moment, and then out of that, something better. I mean, if you go back to that cycle I said at the start, it does come back round. After you get to the end of it, you have rebirth, you have renewal, and you have people start to work together again and build a better society. Morality comes back into it. But the problem we've got is we want that now, but it's just not there yet. It's going to take some real hardship to get people back to.
It might not even be in our lifetime. And I mean, it could take that long to get to the other side of it, and which is okay. But, I always find it, when people will message me, black-pilled or demoralized, and, I don't, the word demoralized, Matt said this too, if you're a moral person, not that I've been a saint my whole life, you can't be demoralized. And I'm not demoralized, and I'm not black-pilled. I think it's just, this is where we are. And I never believed anybody was going to come save me. And, and that's why I took the time to take these 5.5 weeks and go out on the road and see things with my own eyes, because the internet can only show you so much sometimes. And, look at different areas and say, okay, where might I want to live in the case of if things were to get that bad, or even just in general, because I don't think the future is in the Southwest. And we've talked about it. There's no water here. It was a good idea at the time. This was a good idea at the time. My friend Jim Kunstler said that. It started off with a road in a neighborhood. They got a little church, a little shitty shopping center, and they just added more and more. And then you had a freeway, and then you have a loop to connect the two freeways. And here, Vegas, same thing. Vegas wasn't designed to become a community. Now they got football, and they're bringing baseball there. That's not. There's no water there either. It's a degenerate city it's a gambling mecca for degenerates. that are grifting every chance they can at anybody that comes there right now with no water.
And that's it. There's different places to be during different times in the cycle too. There's a lot of people out there now who are moving back to farms and homesteads. I've got a friend who was manager of a hedge fund on Wall Street, and he spent his entire life doing that, managing billions of dollars under assets. He now lives on a farm, and he openly says, I wouldn't be on a farm if I didn't see what's coming. I don't want to be on a farm. I want to live in a city. I like going to restaurants. I like that life. That's the life I want. But now's not the time for that. Now's the time to actually be on a farm, grow your own food, have some self-sufficiency. And, I think there's a lot of people like that, Mike. They understand that this is not the time to be in Arizona. This is not the time to live in Las Vegas in an apartment and to be spending your time in casinos. Now's the time to be more serious and just prepare yourselves, because even the people, like I was listening to a podcast today called Macro Voices, it's called, and it has some serious financial people on there that are currently working in finance. They're not ex, and everyone that I listen to is saying, yeah, this can't go on forever. It's going to end. We're going to have debt monetization and a collapse, but just not yet. It's going to be in 2 years. It's going to be 4 years, but nobody says it's going to be in no years. Nobody says it's not going to happen. And that's kind of wild when you think about it, that in the mainstream now, they're talking about the things we're talking about. It's just a case of when it happens. That's the only thing people disagree on. A lot of people just keep pushing back the timeline, but you can't push it back forever. At some point, the inevitable gravity takes hold. And if you just look at where we are and some of the craziness that we're seeing, surely these are signs that we're getting close. The bread and circuses of it all. You just said UFC at the White House. maybe that's the indicator we should be looking at. UFC at the White House. That's a big warning sign that we're getting close to something not so good. And I just think you don't want to be one day late on some of these things, Mike. You don't want to be one day late on the water situation.
You know what? I was supposed to be gone for all of July, and I got back on the 4th, and last week it hit 118 degrees, and I did this last summer too, though, and I kept thinking, oh my God, if the power went out today, this city, 95%, probably more than that, would be dead. Like, you run out of water. I mean, they say you can't survive without 3 days on water. Well, when it's 110, I think that 3 days goes to about a day and a half, and you're not getting out of here in a car on a freeway. There's not a lot of freeways to leave the city. It's a valley. So, I mean, I'd be screwed. And, yeah. So, I mean, I know I need to leave. It's just, it's hard. You've lived somewhere for 19 years, and it's just not the easiest. Sometimes you're attached to things. You need to be able to detach. But that's, I think, one of the most important things too, is people need to practice non-attachment as we move into this direction that we're moving into, because life is going to change, and things that, the comforts and conveniences you're used to are going away. So the easier you are to be able to surrender that, the life will be, you'll be able to cope, I think, a little bit better.
Yeah, it's definitely more about mindset than it is actual practical preparations. I mean, they're important. But at the end of the day, like you said, things can change fast, and you need a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. You need to have different ideas in your mind as to what might happen, and then create a plan for them. So, I create a plan B and a plan C and etc. And I create networks with people that I trust, people that are doing similar things. That's really important, to have people across the world that understand what's happening, and you create relationships with them and you become friends, because in a crisis, you're going to need other people, and they're going to need other people. Nobody wants to be isolated, even if they've got a farm and they're looking after themselves. There's security in numbers, having other people there to help out, because things get tougher and you need more hands on deck. And like I said, it gives you insulation. So all of those things are useful to do, and non-attachment is a key part of it. It's not really about, for me, it's not really about, surviving whatever happens in, living in some kind of bunker. It's not about that. It's about thriving. It's about actually having a good quality of life. And sometimes that might mean, moving. If you go back to the period of 1930 to 1950, you could have done a lot of hopping from country to country, and then that country gets overrun or invaded, then that country gets bombed. It was not necessarily self-evident in 1920 where was the best place to be, and many of the places that you could have chosen 10 years later would have been a terrible place to be. So yeah, definitely not attachment. Skills are more important than anything, but mindset's the most, just have a mindset of, I would say, going back to those foundational principles. Like what matters is truth, community, integrity for sure. I think integrity is the currency as well, Mike, as we go forward. Like if you can trust somebody and you know somebody's a man or a woman of their word, in a society where that's being eviscerated, that's so valuable. I would rather have somebody I trust close by to me, even if maybe, I've already set something up, but they need some help. Those are the people that you bring in. Those are the people you'd want to kind of commune with. So, yeah, integrity is so important. And we can be doing all of these things as part of our day-to-day life. It's not like you have to radically change your life right now and do something drastic. Most people, it's a case of just starting to have an eye towards what might happen. And yeah, it's a time for self-growth, I think. That's what I see it as. And these challenges and obstacles, they're kind of the catalyst to self-growth. They give you the opportunity to become better versions of yourself if you use them correctly. It's a Stoic philosophy. And, you like Stoicism, I do. A lot of the men that I kind of get on with are people who follow that Stoic philosophy of saying, okay, there's not a lot I can do about this stuff, but what I can do is decide how I react to it, how I respond to it, and what lessons and strengths I can draw from overcoming. And I think that's more of a practical way of living through difficult times rather than sitting there and complain. I mean, we spoke about what's happening, but I don't think either of us go away and sit there and cry about it. And woe is me, what terrible times to be alive. In essence, it's probably still the best time to be alive in history. Yes, that could change fast, but still, there's not many places back throughout history where you could place yourself now, Mike, that would be better in terms of your ability to choose where you live, what you do, how you live, and the essentials of life being available than now. That could change, so prepare for that, but also don't lament the times you live because we only get one life, and life's still very beautiful. Both of us love to trail run. That's a good reminder for me of how beautiful life can be, just getting out there on the trails, running. And, I've gone back recently to really embracing not listening to podcasts that just constantly talk about this stuff. Like I talk about it with you, but it's not necessarily what I want to listen to all day long. I'll go and listen to a trail running podcast. I'll watch some boxing. I'll do things that give me something else to focus on because I think you need downtime. Swimming in this stuff all the time, 24/7, as you probably know from being an interviewer, it's not healthy. You need to have an antidote to it as well, even if the antidote is not necessarily the most meaningful stuff. Watching a boxing fight or going for a run, those things are useful right now. That's my thoughts. What about you, Mike? Do you find that you need those things, those antidotes to all of the craziness?
Yeah, and it was one of the beauties of being a runner, and then going to the other side of the country. I got to run in so many different places this summer, and some with music. I like music when I run, but some places I didn't because it was gravel road, and I wanted to make sure I heard the cars coming. But man, I mean, I got Rochester, New York. I was running on bike paths. I was in Asheville with a lot of hurricane damage. I got to run on a bike path around the river, and I was up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York and on a dirt road, and all you heard were the trees, just trees, going back and forth, and it was beautiful. It just made me appreciate it being 47 now that I can still do it, go out and run, and that's one of the beauties of just taking your shoes with you no matter where you are. I mean, my friend Matt Bracken points that out. He's like, be a runner for as long as you can and appreciate the fact that you just take your shoes and wherever you go, put them on and you go out the door and just enjoy the settings. And I've always, even my hardest times that I've ever had, I've always been really thankful that I can run. And not that it's like that difficult right now, but like just the fact I can go out and just relieve the stress and just get out there and run. And we were talking, we talked the last time. I've always loved boxing. I mean, this weekend, if you pay for all this stuff, you could go broke tomorrow watching all the events that are happening. There's three major events tomorrow.
Who we got? We've got Manny Pacquiao, but what's the other two fights?
Usyk is fighting in the UK in the afternoon. Well, it's the afternoon in American time. And then there's a UFC fight tomorrow night. Poirier, I forgot who he's fighting, but that's a pay-per-view too. So my understanding is that's an $80 pay-per-view event. The Pacquiao fight is an $80 American dollar pay-per-view, which is 90 with tax, which is ridiculous. And then the Usyk, I don't know if that's pay-per-view on DAZN, but that's in the afternoon. But if you pay for all those, you're gonna be broke. You're in for $200.
That's expensive. Yeah, I don't think I'll watch any of them live. I might watch the Usyk Dubois fight, but it didn't really capture my attention too much. But yeah, in any case, yeah, it is expensive actually. And you know, I know some places where you can watch them for free. I'm not advising listeners do that, but there is certain Russian websites where these things are for free, so long as you don't mind a drunk Russian in the middle of the broadcast singing. Occasionally, the commentary cuts off, and you'll just hear some Russian who's clearly drunk singing a song for 2 minutes, and then it cuts back to the commentary. And yeah, that sometimes is some comedic relief during a fight.
Yeah, so do you have interest in the Pacquiao fight, and where do you see? You know, they're selling this. Talk about propaganda. They're showing him his training videos on YouTube, and I'm sure they're. I mean, it's not that they've been doctored or anything, but he's 46.
Yeah, you know, it's not going to change anything, right? If Pacquiao wins this fight or loses this fight, it doesn't change anything because his record is what it was. People recognize that he's an old man now. If he wins it, it will certainly be a celebration for his fans. But if he lost it, it's not going to change a lot. You know, people will always say, well, he did that when he was in his 40s and it was just a payday. So I don't think it's necessarily an important fight. It's more of, like you said, just intrigue. Oh, I wonder how he can perform in his mid 40s. And, you know, I've seen some of those training videos, and boxers have such amazing skills that even though they might lose punch resistance and maybe their speed starts to decline, if they were technically good, they're still brilliant to watch. You know, you can watch him on a bag and you can watch his technique, and his technique's not gone anywhere. He can still throw all of the punches. His footwork's still amazing. So he still looks good. But that doesn't always translate into a good fighter because you're fighting somebody who's young, thirsty, has punch resistance, hasn't taken, half as many knocks as you have, and is probably, a few steps ahead. So in that regard, he looks great in training, but let's see what he's got in the fight. I mean, I don't know anything about the guy he's fighting
He's
either.
30 years old. He's 30 years old, and I want to say he's over 6 feet tall.
But what's his record like? What's his career been like?
He beat Ugas, the last fight Pacquiao was in, Ugas had beaten him, but Pacquiao fought him on short notice because Errol Spence had that detached retina. Tank Davis TKO'd Barrios. Barrios is the guy he's fighting. He pulling up his record right now real quick. Yeah, because he's 16 years younger than Pacquiao. He's 30 years old. He's 6 feet. Total fights 32, 29 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw.
Yeah, I've got his record here. So who's he beat? That's a name.
I mean, he's a champion. He's a WBA regular super lightweight champion.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I don't think it matters too much. What do you think? I mean, we both were huge fans of Pacquiao. I was watching Pacquiao when he was like he had the body of like a 14-year-old. He was really wiry and skinny, and nobody knew who he was back then. It was when he was fighting out of the Philippines, mainly fighting in the Philippines, and then I saw some of his first fights in the US, and I always just loved his style. He was a fighter. He was a boxer fighter in that he had the technical skills of a boxer, but he wasn't a standoff boxer who was going to jab you for the entire fight. Like, no, he was pressure forwards, punches in bunches, and the angles as well. Like the way he'd punch you from the front, and then he'd be at the side, then he'd be in the front, then he'd be at the other side, and you just couldn't ever tell where he was going to go next. So it was very exciting to watch. To see him kind of lose at this point or get really badly knocked out, I think it would be sad as a fan to see that. to see someone go out like that. I don't think he needs the money either, so I'm surprised that he's done it. I've not heard of him making any terrible financial decisions and going bankrupt. And he's not doing what Mayweather does or, certain fighters do where they just have puff fights that are just going to be easy and, they get paid 20 million just for dancing around with someone. This is going to be a tough fight. So, yeah, probably not a great idea, but I'll watch it probably. I'll watch the replay.
But it's the intrigue of it to see if he's still. I mean, Father Time is undefeated, and I've talked about LeBron James. I don't know if I talked about it on here, but I've been following him since he was 15, 16, because he's from Northeast Ohio, where I'm from, Northeast Ohio, and I watched the NBA playoffs this year, and they were great actually. And I was like stopped watching sports but I watched a lot of it, and it was fantastic this year. And I watched, Anthony Edwards, who's 25 years old, just run LeBron into the ground, where the last two games, by the fourth quarter, he couldn't score a point. And, I get it. You have the best trainers, the best everything, and you can, afford to have them around you 24 hours a day. But he's going to be 41. 41-year-olds, you can't go toe-to-toe in the postseason with a 25-year-old and chase him around like that and keep up. So, I mean, Tom Brady was the exception, I think, but, from NFL, from football, but Pacquiao being 46 and you're built on speed and power, the power's still there, but, it's not like a heavyweight or Bernard Hopkins, who was a light heavyweight, that you could prolong your career well into your 40s. So, I mean, like, I obviously want him to win, but I also know if he wins, he's going to fight again. Like, he's not going to stop. You can't give it up. These guys just can't give it up.
And the thing is, with Pacquiao, his style doesn't really lend itself to longevity. When you speak about Bernard Hopkins, or let's say, who else have we seen that's really pushed it? James Toney, even. Like Bernard Hopkins, James Toney, they were very elusive. They were very elusive fighters, and they were counter punchers. They were good at dodging, slipping. So they had this massive amount of experience that made them extremely tricky for young fighters. Young fighters could be fast and powerful, and they could have more endurance and stamina than these older fighters, but they were so wily. They were so tricky to fight that they could push it a bit further, and they could have upsets against young people because they just understood how to old man a young person. How to just make a fool of them, essentially, if they could use all of the tricks of the trade. Like, they knew how to fight on the inside. Like a young person on the inside, a young boxer, they just don't have all of the tricks and the slickness. But Pacquiao was never like that. He was a pressure forward fighter, punches and bunches. That's not a style that lasts long into your retirement. He was not somebody who was known for slipping and sliding and ducking. He was coming forward. So that, again, makes me think that it's not going to be a glorious renaissance for his career. It's probably going to be, at some point, he'll get exposed. But maybe I could be wrong, And the great thing about boxing, in any case, is even a boring fight. Like, I've watched tons. I used to watch all of the fights. Like, if there was a night of fights on, even though the first, like, let's say 5 fights, you don't know who it is. It's just nobody's on the bill. I'd still watch them, and occasionally the drama just gets ignited because something happens in a fight, or you get two people that their styles just really work well together, and what on paper was a boring matchup that nobody's interested in, now you're really watching it. And that could happen with Pacquiao too. It could just turn out to be a brilliant, dramatic fight where from start to finish you're just watching it, or it could turn out to be a waste of $80 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I'm not getting emotional and buying into it this time. You say Bernard Hopkins, He was so good at mentally breaking fighters, leading up to the actual fight itself. And it was finally the last one he was in. I don't know if he was 50 or 51. And quite honestly, I don't remember the guy who he fought, but whoever the guy was, you could tell none of that psychological stuff was going to work. And he went into it with like, you are 50 years old, 50 plus years old. This is it. And he blasted him, and Hopkins fell through the ropes out of the ring. And that was it. That was the last time he fought.
What did you think of the Calzaghe Hopkins fight?
I don't know that I ever saw that. The one I remember with him, because there was a period where I wasn't watching it, was when he fought Kelly Pavlik. and
Oh
he and
yeah.
Jermaine Taylor, but Kelly Pavlik was after. And Kelly Pavlik I watched because he was from Northeast Ohio. He's from Youngstown, and he psychologically broke him in that fight. And he was really never the same after that.
After Calzaghe?
No, no, no. Kelly Pavlik when he
Hopkins.
fought Hopkins.
Yeah. Yeah, Pavlik was touted as, yeah, he was really, I never liked his style. I never liked his style, but he was touted as being, the next big thing. But yeah, I
Because
mean,
he beat
Hopkins
Jermaine
did that to
Taylor.
a
He
lot.
beat Jermaine Taylor, and then he fought Hopkins. I think might have been right after. He beat Jermaine Taylor twice, I think, and he was undefeated. And Hopkins gave him his first loss.
Yeah, Hopkins did that to a lot of people. But the Calzaghe Hopkins fight is definitely one worth watching. That was the fight where before the matchup in the pre-fight build-up, Hopkins said, "I'll never let a white man beat me," and it was considered really controversial at the time. He said, "I'll never let a white man beat me," and then Joe Calzaghe did beat him. But people say that a fight wasn't that interesting, but it was really, for me, if you like the strategy of boxing, I thought it was really interesting. He put Calzaghe down from the second time, I think it was in his career, in round number two or three. And then, yeah, then after that, Calzaghe just takes over. And Calzaghe wasn't a puncher, but I think he outpunched Hopkins something like 5 punches to 1. It was insane. He was just throwing everything at him, and yeah, Hopkins by the end of it was just beat up. And yeah, it was a great fight. It's worth watching. I mean, yeah, I love, as listeners can probably tell, I love boxing as much as you do, and yeah, I spend a lot of time watching the old fights now because the fights that they give us now, Mike, just ain't so great as well. A lot of these fights are just hype jobs, and the old fights where you used to have fighters going at it 6, 7 times a year, those were true fighters.
Yeah, and they don't, and they just don't have that international superstar right now either. They're looking for it, but they're just not. Like Canelo was. I mean, I know he's big in Mexico, but his English it was a problem to become that guy in America. And I mean, mind you, I've watched him in some great fights. I think Tyson Fury had the potential, but he's getting up there now. And Ryan Garcia, I thought had the potential, but he's just kind of a train wreck. So it's and I like watching him, but his last fight was just awful, awful. And then he had hand surgery, so I'm sure he'll be back.
I used to train at the gym of, do you remember Ryan Garcia versus Luke Campbell?
Yeah,
Yeah, I trained at Luke's gym. He's a family friend, and yeah, that was a great fight. I always was a big fan of Ryan Garcia, and I did actually think going into that fight it was a big ask for Luke because he's got a beautiful style. He's got power. He's got great combinations, but yeah, unfortunately, like he when he was doing all these tweets, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Ryan Garcia. He does look like he's. I mean, I don't know if he's still like that or if it's changed, but he did look like he was going down some pretty hard mental, psychological paths.
and these guys too, they can't cope. They can't handle it. And but then he comes out, he beats Devin Haney the way he did, and it was entertaining. He got later failed the drug test, the PED test, but then he had an opportunity against Raleigh Romero, and the whole Times Square event that the Saudis put on, it just was a disaster. It was boring. The city officials wouldn't give them access, so nobody could see it from the street. It was supposed to be, I mean, on paper, it was a great card, and all the fights were just boring, not entertaining. And that's when the Saudis were, they're calling out this last card saying, Tom and Jerry, like, you guys better start fighting because they're showing all his money for all this stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, Usyk tomorrow, I expect him to win, but you never know with heavyweights because they hit so hard. I mean, one punch can just change the whole, trajectory. And I could see if Dubois somehow pulls it off, then Fury will come back in, fight Dubois, and he'll get all the belts back.
Yeah, I've got my money on Usyk for that one. I've
You can't
heard
bet
from other
against him. You
boxers.
can't bet against Usyk at this point. But they're big, powerful sons of bitches, and one punch could really change things.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it could. It could. It only takes that one punch in the right spot that just gets through, and the whole fight can change. But yeah, I've heard from other boxers that have trained with Usyk. They've been across to Ukraine and trained with him. They said they've never seen anyone train like him. He's just so focused and dedicated. He's the first man in the gym and he's the last man to leave. And also, I think the thing with Usyk that you often don't get with Western fighters is his his spiritual belief. He's a devout Orthodox Catholic and Orthodox Christian, and because of that, I think that's important too. It gives them a higher minded kind of purpose towards what they're doing, and combined, it makes him very mentally tough. Not just physically, not just a great boxer, but that mental side of it as well. And then you've got people in the West, like boxers that are brought up in the UK and America, and yeah, they get trained for a fight, and then they just let themselves go. They just don't maintain the condition in the off season or between fights. I don't think you can do that. If you're going to face someone like Usyk, you have to treat yourself like a professional athlete all the time. And I don't know about Dubois. I don't know if he does. I don't know if he's somebody who balloons up in between fights. But I think when you're facing people of that skill level who take it as seriously as Usyk does, you're going to have to be fantastic on the day to beat him. Unless you get lucky with one punch.
Well, and Usyk's getting older too. I mean, unless age catches up with him, and you get to a certain threshold where it could literally catch up to you during the fight. So I want to say he's like 38 or 39 years old. He's not a young guy, and I think Dubois, Usyk already beat, but I think Dubois is maybe early 30s or something. So,
what did you think, Mike, when Usyk fought Joshua and Joshua had the breakdown at the end of the fight? Do you remember that? And he stole the microphone off him, and
I don't. Well, I remember what. Oh, he's 38. Usyk's 38, so he'll be 39 in January. Is that the first? That had been the first fight, right?
Yeah, and Joshua stole the microphone at the end, and he had kind of a mental breakdown in the ring. It was crazy, and Usyk had just won the belts, right? So as the loser, you just say, "Listen, congratulations, thanks for the fight," and then you kind of move aside so that he can celebrate. But instead, he went into this long, drawn out speech where he said, "How could this guy beat me? How could this guy beat me? I trained the hardest," and it went on for about 10 minutes, and the whole crowd was booing. Usyk just looked embarrassed. He actually stole Usyk's flag at one point. He took the belts off Usyk and threw them out the ring. It was crazy.
And then he beat him again,
love it.
And Dubois just beat Joshua too. So yeah, tomorrow will be a tell, where this all goes. But I still think, next year, I mean, we'll see if Usyk retires after this. I tend to believe they never retire, especially the money he's making right now. He's not going to leave more of that on the table. But I still think you're going to see a Fury Joshua in the UK because it'll just be huge, and they'll both make a lot of money. Maybe you'll get Joshua Wilder first. Maybe that happens at the end of the year because there's people who watch it. You could put that in the UK too, and I mean it's 7 years too late, but still. Mayweather Pacquiao was 7 years too late, or whatever that was, 6 years too late. So,
yeah, I remember that how long it went on for. But Mayweather was great at catching people at just the right time. That's one of the things. It's a skill in and of itself is catching someone at the right time as a boxer.
Well, the money they made from that too, though. I mean, they were very smart to. I mean, it all fell into place, but they made so much money. That fight was 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. And they made so much money, they would have never made that in 2009. I mean, I remember they both were guaranteed something like $20 million in 2009, something like that. Maybe it was 2008. No, it couldn't have been 2008. It was 2009 or 2010. I mean, they made hundreds of millions of dollars for that fight in 2015. So yeah. What do they care? They're laughing all the way to the bank.
And, the boxers now who are fighting in Saudi are getting paid huge sums, even if they're not major fighters, not major draws. So the money's going up and up and up. But I think the downside of that is, over the last 20 years, it's become far more of a business than it has, a competitive sport even. It's about getting the amp up for the fight, selling the fight to people, and that creates a pantomime kind of atmosphere too, where the fighters have to have some real bad blood between each other and fight at the weigh-in just to get people's interest piqued. And I'm not really into that side of it. I just want to see two great fighters fight each other. And that's why I like sports like, we watch ultra running, both of us. Did you watch the Western States 100 or at least follow some of it?
Yeah, I saw Abby Hall won it, and Killian took fourth, and Jim Walmsley was supposed to do it, but he withdrew. I was surprised at Killian. Or did he take third or fourth? I mean, I've been following him.
Third, I think. I think it was third.
Was he third? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was following. I mean, Unbreakable. That was his debut at Western, and that was 2010, which is crazy. I mean,
But
he's
the great thing about it though, ultra running is it's so low key, right? You know, and all of the best do race each other all the time, and you could actually run alongside these guys. You could even train with them. Like if you went outside for the Western States training weekend, you could be running against the best, running alongside the best runners in the world. It's so accessible. So I find you know all of these big sports where it's becoming more of a business. I like, you know, and don't get me wrong, that it is a business if you're an ultra runner in the professional game because you need to get sponsored. But I like how grassroots it still feels, and there's, you know, as you can be alongside the elites, you can run in the same races as the elites. So there's something cool about that. And watching Western States recently with Killian coming back, and I'm sure listeners have switched off at this point, Mike. It is literally just me and you talking to each other with zero listeners at this point. There's no,
right.
unless somebody fell asleep during part one and has just woken up and they're like, "Am I dreaming?"
Yeah, right.
Like, what?
But that's why we did this
What?
at the end, right? Because people be like,
Yeah.
"Look, I turned it off at minute 4 because all they were doing was talking about boxing and ultra running." Like, I still like Courtney Dauwalter is like my favorite person to just follow on social media because, and she already signed up for Cocodona next year, because she dropped out, and I just love her, man. She's just
Mike, I never realized the talent of Courtney until you mentioned it because I was away from the sport for so long. I mean, for listeners that don't know, I used to be a competitive ultra runner, so I was big in the sport back when you first got into it, and I still run, but I'd stopped kind of following the pros. And you mentioned Courtney Dauwalter, and I looked at her record, and man, I couldn't believe what a talent she was or is. You know, she's coming out right third, second place, first place in really competitive races against men. So
she's 40 years
what
old.
unbelievable.
She also, if you look at her, she looks like a basketball player. She's tall. Like she wears. I forgot who sponsors her. Might be Puma, but whoever sponsors Salomon maybe. But her shorts look like basketball shorts. Like they're longer, they're loose, and she talks about when she loves to go into the pain cave. When she's getting ready to do a race, she's like, "It's time to go into the pain cave."
Yeah.
And all she thought when she's done, she wants beer and nachos. Like that's her thing, like beer and she smashed. Was it last year? She smashed Western. She set course record at Hard Rock. She UTMB. I think she maybe got the second best record behind her own original record, but she won all 3 of those last year.
Yeah, and the time difference between Western States and Hard Rock is weeks.
3 weeks.
It's just,
3 weeks.
yeah.
And she did all of that. And I mean, I watched her run Desert Solstice here a long time ago in Phoenix in December. We were running around a track for 24 hours. I forgot how long she went, but I mean, she's just an anomaly, man. Like she is something I've never seen. And again, she's not 25; she's 40.
Yeah, normally if you know you've seen some great runners doing the 24-hour stuff like Camille Herron, but they don't translate very well to the competitive trail. So they can be fantastic on the track, but once you put them at Western States, they're just not there. She's got that versatility. She can do the 24-hour stuff, the track stuff. She can do hard rock, which is mountainous, really rough terrain, UTMB rough terrain. She can do Western States, which is smooth trail. Like, have we ever seen an ultra runner with that much versatility and talent at the same time? Probably not.
And she'll come back and do Cocodona next year. I mean, if she comes back and does it, I mean, she's already signed up for it, but she'll have a much better outing, performance. And, I expect her to probably win it. I mean, she's just like, her grit and her mental like determination is nothing like I've ever seen. And that was so cool about Cocodona too. I mean, she dropped, but Cameron Haynes, I mean, he was on a broken foot and he ran that race. Broken foot.
Insane.
I mean, he's in his upper 50s, mid to upper 50s. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't followed it as much, the last couple of years. I watch it, I see the results or whatever. I saw Abby Hall, then Katie Scheid won Hard Rock. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know Walmsley. I think he's still winning races that he participates in, but he's got to be he's upper 30s now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with ultra running is because I mean, it's a very demanding spot on the body because you just pick up injuries all the time running that far. But I think in terms of the cardiovascular side of it, you can do it for much longer because your speed starts to go as a runner earlier in your career, but your endurance can prolong for a longer time. So, you can have people in the 40s, 50s, maybe even. I think they'll be competitive for a long time, but they will start to drop off eventually because the talent pool of ultra running's grown so much because there's more money in it now. It used to be if you wanted money, you had to become a marathon runner or a track racer. But now, because the sponsorship deals are pretty good, you can get like 2:10 marathon runners saying, I'm going to become an ultra runner because 2:10 is a great marathon, but it's not going to win me, it's not going to win me the majors. But I could become an ultra runner with a 2:10 marathon and actually win a lot of these races. So the talent level is getting higher and higher. And I said to my wife, the other day, when I was an ultra runner, I dreamed of becoming the British champion and top level in Europe. I said, it's really sad. I think if I joined the sport now at the age I was when I joined it, I don't think I would have any chance of making that. I mean, when I joined it, the level was low. It wasn't low. It was still very high, but it was at the level where I could still have made it to I was competing at the top level in Britain, but I just thought, I don't think I could do it now, Mike. The quality is so high. If you ain't running at least 2:20 in the marathon, you might struggle. As an ultra runner.
And it's getting younger, and it's getting so in the sport it's gotten younger and younger and younger because of social media, because of there's more money out there that more people, getting right out of college, if their pro, marathon career isn't going anywhere, then they can jump into the ultra world. And, Flagstaff's a big thing here. I mean, Flagstaff's Northern Arizona University. That's the #1 men's cross country college team in the country.
Do you ever go down and run with these people, Mike?
No, I'm too slow, man. I'm so slow. I used to go up there though, and I would record podcasts with people up there because it's like a mecca for runners. Like you run on what's called the Urban Trail, and it goes through Flag. It can go right through the town, but then you could take it out into the woods, and it's really nice. I would stay at a hotel, and I could catch it. Walk out the door and just run down the driveway and see and catch it, jump on it, and everybody you run by, you're like, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? Because they all look like a prototypical Olympian. So it's cool. I haven't been there in a while, though. I mean, the town is so progressive to the point where I've just kind of been turned off to want to go. And some of the runners that I used to have on, I mean, now because I wasn't political back then, I don't know that they would come talk to me, which is fine.
That's one thing that I really was sad to see, that when I kind of started tuning back in a little bit, I realized that, there's runners racing in trans flag shorts and all kinds of stuff going on. And I'm like, wow, I don't think I would enjoy that community as much as I used to, because it was a great community when I started. Like everyone was really friendly. You'd go out for drinks after a race, you'd all chat. But this ideology has really infused itself with that community. And I think that's a sign of the times too. You can't even have a run without having to support some surgery for children. It's crazy.
Well, and also too, it's like, and I think that what really disappoints me is the women that are like so pro-trans and these women athletes, and yet they're contributing to the killing of their own sport. And that's where I find it just shameful. And that comes back to full circle. What we talked about is there's just no moral compass in this country anymore, or, Europe as well. But with the running, but in terms of the sport, there's no moral compass. And these people are looking to get paid, even though now the money is dried up for this. But like the BLM and the trans and Pride Month and all of that, it's purely driven by dollars. But yet the women should know better. They're contributing to the destruction of their own sport, and it's disgusting to me. So and the track and the marathoners. I mean, there's some of them that I follow. Same thing. A lot of them, like, So you get what you deserve.
Yeah, but there you go. It's destroying things that are good, that bring people together. Community-led initiatives. It's dividing and atomizing society on every level, and I think that's the point. on the left and the right. We're just being atomized again and again until you get to the point where you feel, well, I don't align with anybody and I'm isolated. It's just people like us talking on podcasts and people who kind of separate themselves a bit and just look back upon it all and shake their head. But in terms of actually engaging with more local initiatives, yeah, you might turn up at your local running group, and if you don't agree with some of that stuff, you get blackballed and kicked out. And I used to run with anyone and everyone. Like I love to run with other people, and we never discussed politics ever. Like it was never a thing. We never discussed ideology. We talked about races, and that was it. But now, because they've infused ideology to everything, it feels like you would soon end up in one of those discussions. And I guess we've all got to become better at managing those situations and just recognizing that you don't get involved in it. But yeah, some people force you, some people do force you to get involved in it. So yeah, difficult times, but yeah, maybe the good thing about running is the trails are always open. Nobody can stop you. Get out there, run, and detune from some of the nonsense that's going on in the world.
Where can people find you?
You can find me on Substack. That's probably the best place, substack.com/parallel systems. And you can find my financial content, although we didn't speak much about finance today. You can find it all on there, articles. And then I've also got a podcast, which you can find by just searching in your podcast app for Parallel Mike Podcast. And on that, we have discussions, which actually go to many different places. So we talk about all kinds of things. Whereas my Substack or my YouTube channel, Parallel Systems Broadcast, it's mainly about finance and geopolitics. So there's a little bit for everyone. And thank you again so much, Mike, for the opportunity and to be on your great show. I really enjoy your conversation, so it's an honor to be on it.
Thanks for coming. We didn't get to talk about finance too much, but that's more of a reason for you to come back. And we'll talk more about it because, God only knows in a week from now where we'll be in the world, and there'll be, always something to discuss. So
that's true. And yeah, I'd love to have you back on my show as well, Mike, and we'll probably pick back up on some of these conversations there as well.
Whenever you're ready, man, whenever you want, let me know. So I appreciate it and look forward to the next one. Mic drop.